Well, good afternoon. I think we'll go ahead and make a start. Thank you for choosing compliance as your subject so soon after lunch. I hope it'll be inspiring to hear this story from HC1, and also give you some ideas, hopefully, to take back and to employ in your own organizations. I hope that by the end of this, you'll see compliance training in a different way, and actually what you can get out of it for your organization. I think too often we see compliance as a box ticking, when really we've got an opportunity to speak to everyone and to really infuse some of the values and the vision of the organization in that training. So we're going to talk about how HC1 did that to really change behavior. Compliance is an important subject, and the Towards Maturity benchmark last year showed that 84% of us want to use learning technology, want to use e-learning to meet the compliance need. And a similar percentage want to use learning technology to meet customer service needs. But what's disappointing in the benchmark is that only 22% are saying that they're seeing a positive change in behavior. So we want to use it for compliance, and maybe we are. I mean, in large percentages we are, but we're not seeing the results. And so I think we need to ask ourselves a question and wonder what we're doing wrong, what we could do differently, how we could approach it differently to change that pie chart to be a bit more positive. Compliance is important. I mean, you hear stories all the time of large banks maybe getting into trouble. Compliance for HC1 was very important because people's lives are at stake. It's not just money and fraud and things like that, but real lives are at stake. So compliance kind of raises up the stakes in a care organization. So the first question I want to ask is, how are you approaching compliance training? I break it down into kind of two levels. Level one is to get people to do the training. Okay? So that's our starting point. We have to demonstrate that people have been trained, right? And we have to have records that they've been trained. And that we can't not start at level one. We have to get people to do the training. But what I'm advocating is that we push beyond that to a level two, which would affect that pie chart that we saw at the very beginning, to actually work to try to get people to live out the training. It's not enough to have a record that they did the training if 2 days later they ignore everything they read and go back to their old behavior. So that's what we want to talk about. How did HC1 both engage the heart to drive adoption of the learning, to get people to do it? Because I know some of you might be struggling with that as it is, that maybe you're at 30 or 40% of actually getting people to do it, and that's your big hurdle. So we'll talk a little bit about strategies there. But how do you engage the heart to actually change the behavior? How do you take it beyond the level one and push to level two and start to see some of those business value results that can come from e-learning? We're going to fast forward to the end of the story because I want to show you some of the results that HC1 got in terms of adoption. After about the first year of having launched the e-learning, they've completed 325,000 courses. That's one every 2 minutes, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's from an organization that didn't have any e-learning before. So 15,000 people. So that's a lot of people to do e-learning, but still, that's a lot of courses. That's a lot of adoption. And 100% of those people are engaged and using the training online. The project itself has won a lot of awards in the last 12 months. And so these are awards I think that we should pay attention to because they're not just about numbers, they're about real business impact. So best use of learning technologies, best operational training program, really making a difference in the organization. That's the sort of thing we want our compliance training to be doing. Best e-learning project, best compliance e-learning project, and then a peer award for using technology for people and performance. So really using learning technology to make a difference. So let's talk about HC1. Let's talk about the story and the journey that they've been on. You remember about 3 years ago, it'll be in 3 years in June, the Southern Cross homes began to fail, if you remember that, and there was big concern throughout the country. What's going to happen to these care homes? What's going to happen to the residents, the staff? And there was discussion of who was going to take over the running of the Southern Cross homes. Well, HC1 stepped in a few months after that, formed a new company to take just over 230 of those homes and form a new business out of them. So taking on 10,000 residents who were already living in those homes and 15,000 staff, 15,000 colleagues. And they set out to have as their vision to create the kindest care company in the UK. That was their vision, very clear from day one. That's what we're about. We might not always be the plushest, but we are focused on being the kindest. Okay, so that was the vision that they came to us with when we designed the Touch e-learning program. And we're going to talk about the components of that and how that came together. But 12 months on, they had a full blended learning program that was addressing those key compliance needs, other higher level needs on dignity and dementia and other things that they were able to offer as well, but targeting those essential things that would help them become kinder in their care. So a new touch for the kindest care. The program was launched focused like a laser beam really on how do we make carers kinder by teaching them infection control? How do we do that through health and safety? And so it forced us to ask questions, what does kind food safety look like? If you think about it, a care home where you want to put your loved one that is clean, that is safe, that serves hot food, that's safe and not spoiled in some way, that's kind, isn't it? I mean, that's the kind environment. So we were able to align that sort of training with the mission of the organization. So to move training from training for compliance, just to tick boxes, to training for quality and kindness. So the goal was not, we need to tick all these boxes. The goal became, how do we help build this kind culture? And how do we use the required courses to do that? So everything became infused with messages of this people-based organization. And as I said, when we did infection control or food safety, it was aligned with those messages of how is this helping you deliver a better service to the customer. So I'd ask you to think about it from your organization's point of view. What does your organization care about? Where are you trying to go as an organization? How are you trying to serve your customers better? How are you trying to improve quality to differentiate from the competition? And then think, how can I use all those required courses that I have to do, and they seem like such a drag, to somehow show people that by doing data protection better, we're actually serving our customers better. Think about Channel 4 for a second. Have you ever seen their viewer promise? They publicize this viewer promise on TV, online, that if you give them your data, if you give them information about you, it helps them with their programming and their scheduling and deciding what shows to, but they promise to look after your data. They promise to look after that. And that raises the stakes for data protection training, doesn't it, inside that organization? Because that is now aligned and meeting the customer service needs that they've set out, the goals they've set there. So the same thing happened at HC1. I just ask you to think about where in your organization can you use some of that required training to align with where the business is going. The second thing that they did was to localize the learning. In America, there's a saying, all politics is local. And what that means is the politician might be off in Washington, but their constituents are back there, and they're the people who put them in office, and they need to look after the needs of those people. So you might be in the central office and deciding on training needs, but you need to allow the people to localize what they're learning. Focus on how they're going to use it in the workplace. They're delivering the customer service. They're delivering the operations. How are they going to use the training that you're providing to do that? So examples of that from HC1 were learning activities. So blended with the online learning were things that people could do in the real world, learning activities that they needed to do maybe with a colleague to check themselves on things. Taking that one step further, conversation cards for managers that would dovetail with what was being talked about in the e-learning. So the next time I come as a staff member on a supervision, my manager says, let's talk about infection control for a second. And he pulls out a scenario conversation card, and you discuss some of the key points of the learning. Now, that does a couple things. One, it reinforces what was learned on e-learning. Number two, it empowers that manager to really own that learning and it kind of bridges that chasm that sometimes is in place between the training room and the real world. Do you know what I mean? The idea that, well, I do that in training, but now in the real world, we got to get on with things. So, no, the manager then can own that and say, no, this is how we do it here. It's not just in the training room. It's not just online. This is how I want things to happen, and let's discuss it. I can answer some of your questions maybe and some of the nuances. Okay? Conversations cards are a great way to allow that learning to be localized and really embedded in the workplace. The HC1 LMS actually had things built into it so that managers could sign off staff at different points. This one is an example of medications competency. So they've done their online medications training. They've done hours of medications training. They've probably shadowed different people. Now it's time for their final sign-off before they can do that themselves. And there's a manager or a line manager who does that with them and records the scores of that competency assessment back in the LMS. Now they're shown as competent, not only compliant, but competent. And the managers themselves have reports that they can look at their own individual staff, see where people are, draw up reports. They're not just pooled centrally. They have that in the individual homes. Individual teams within homes can see their reports, see where people are in terms of completing their training, but also where someone might be struggling and they might need some extra help. So getting that out and localizing the learning was a key factor in their success. So the second question is, how might you be able to localize your learning? You might already be running compliance training. You might already be doing a lot of these things. But you could add, they're not big budget things to say, why don't we revisit that subject? Why don't we have a learning activity that goes with that? Why don't I empower my managers with some of the messages from the e-learning and let them follow up in review meetings and appraisals on some of those subjects? So how can you localize your compliance training? And then this is a very important one. This is the third point, and that is to move beyond the module, the silver bullet approach. We're going to do data protection once a year, and that's going to solve all of our problems. I would advocate for more of a campaign approach, a campaign for change. If you really want that behavior change, if you really want that first pie chart to change, I think it's more about drip feeding these messages throughout the year, using other methods other than just the online component. So it might be blending a video 3 months after the e-learning. It might be an offline learning activity. It might be that conversation card. It might be an article about that subject in the company newsletter. Those things are low budget. You don't have to spend a great deal, but you're keeping that issue live throughout the year and not just having it be a one-off tick box exercise that probably isn't making any change in the behavior. So at HC1, that meant creating mini movies and things that could be shared and talked about and kind of got discussion going around the water cooler. They kind of had a bit of an edge to them, maybe some humor, and it got people talking about that subject, and it sort of gave some levity, I guess, to some of those subjects that can be quite dry and heavy. refresher and different pathways for people as they go through the training. So a person might go through, they take their assessment, having done compliance the year before, they find that they've forgotten some things. They're given opportunities to go back in, dig a bit deeper into that subject, and they're actually asked to do a few more things before they're put back on the competent path. Things that can be put in the workplace, performance support sorts of things. You've all probably seen messages to wash your hands and things in loos and things as reminders to do that. Well, those go beyond that to think messages in the kitchen, messages on trolleys, messages on medicine trolleys. They use a device that allows great performance support, gives them, they can scan a medicine vial and scan a person's tag on their door, and then know whether they're using the right medication. So that medication is a big issue, a high risk issue, but they're able to use some of those performance support tools to just revalidate what they know, what they see on paper. But let me just double check. I've got this tool that has all the information in it, and that's kept up to date. Fantastic performance support. For home managers, they carry the load of compliance for the home, and they have some issues there that things they are responsible for. So they created a portal for them to refer to, checklists and things that were helpful for them in performance support. And then communicating this campaign for change. Again, it's not just that one-off silver bullet. It's something that's probably happening throughout the year. This is an example of the communication plan at the launch of Touch, so leading up to the launch of the program, managers' meetings, road shows, competitions, different things to raise the awareness of what was coming. But those things continue now to reinforce that, and they continue now for each of the key subjects to make sure that we're keeping awareness up on infection control, we're keeping awareness up on safeguarding, all of those things that really matter to customer service and kindness. We're campaigning again and again throughout the year. So the two key questions really to take away, I think, what does your organization care about? HC1 cares about kindness. What does your organization really care about? Don't say they care about money or saving money, because they don't. They might, but they also care about the end customer and delivering a better service or differentiating in some way. How can you find a way to align these key compliance subjects with some of those things? Because that's what's going to be the motivation for the people to actually do the training, and the motivation for the managers to encourage people to do it when they can see there's a really good joined up approach here. We're doing this data protection training because it's protecting our customer data, and we're going to look pretty silly if we lose all our customer data and we have to go out and admit that. We're not being very kind to our customers if we do that. Do you see what I'm getting at? So dig for that. Really dig for where your organization's headed, what do they care about, and then look at how you might campaign for change. No silver bullets. Repeated instances throughout the year. Use those things that are already in place. Use managers' meetings. Use your employee newsletter. Those sorts of things to keep that issue alive. So what did HC1 see in terms of results? Well, huge increase in their certified compliance. So they took over a company that a bunch of homes that weren't their own. So the certified compliance score for them was very low. They didn't trust the scores, so they really needed to see that go up, and they were able to do that 3 months ahead of their target. Staff engagement. You might be familiar with the Gallup 12. It's a measure of some questions that are usually sprinkled in within an employee survey that are key indicators of how engaged the employees are with where the organization is going. They were able to see a 10% increase in that. Now, Gallup would say that 5 is fantastic to see that over 1 year period. They were able to achieve 10%. And we're looking forward to the next survey to see how that trend is continuing. Comments from surveys, far fewer incidents, saying things like, we impressed our CQC inspector, that's the Care Quality Commission inspector. We received a 5-star rating for staff care, our highest ever. Those are fantastic things that we want to hear. That's about living out the compliance training. Care we deliver has improved. It's reinforced kindness in all that we do, and staff feel more confident. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we in all training that we do. But compliance shouldn't be outside of that. We shouldn't say, well, that's compliance, and we don't really care if it changes behavior. Actually, we do, and it makes a big difference. Home managers, how do they? I mean, these are the people that if anyone is going to say, you're not giving me trained people, I don't like this, it's going to be the home manager. They're the ones delivering the service. They're the ones responsible for it. And they're saying in high numbers that the e-learning program is making a positive operational impact, higher than 90% saying that. They're saying it's improved their ability to demonstrate compliance. It's improved competence, not just their compliance scores. So fantastic results from the people who would really be the greatest critics if it wasn't making a difference. And then the government did a study of the care industry and held out HC1 and this training program as exceptional, as a benchmark for others to look at. The Cavendish Review pulled it out as a case study for others to look at. And so they're doing something right there. They're doing something right in localizing the learning, in aligning the learning with where the business was trying to go in kinder care, and also in campaigning for change. And staff, when they're asked during that survey, what's the best thing that HC1 has done for you in the last 12 months, and they write in free text their own answers, and we word cloud that together, training comes out by far the biggest item that's mentioned. And that's fantastic. I mean, there are things like pay and job, and you've given me a job, people say, and that, people are very appreciative of that. But training and learning as a separate item coming out in very high numbers there. So HC1 has been successful in aligning with this kindest care and putting compliance subjects behind that to help deliver that kindest care. And I guess I'd ask you, as you go away, how can you understand what your business really cares about and attempt to align some of that required mandatory compliance training with that to really make an impact? Thank you. Thanks.